I got a larger question here then, because here's the thing. From the outside, I'm looking at it from like a financial POV, and we're seeing that the LLMs are kind of leveling off, as you say, in terms of like exponential.
Yeah.
Feeling like magic.
4 to 5 was not nearly as magical.
4 to 5 wasn't as big as 0 to 3, right? And yet the spending has gone the other way. It's exponentially up. We're spending more than ever. They're demanding more than ever. They're promising, $1 trillion to NVIDIA, to Oracle, to Broadcom. And so that's a disconnect that has to be solved eventually, right? When I look at its use cases in like English or writing, or it's still so slop and I don't see revenue generated. But people always tell me that it's really useful in programming. And I don't understand it. I don't know that case. So I want to know, boots on the ground, what you're seeing from LLMs and AI in general in terms of making programming more productive. Can you hire less people? Can they work twice as hard? Like what's happening there that is making it so valuable in that space?
First, I want to hear Doug's opinion on this, and I'm going to look something up while you do that.
To kind of answer that, I'm going to give your opinion, but in tweet form.
Okay,
Perry,
I love
can
this.
you pull this up? So famously, this is what, 2 years ago, something like that?
No, this was in March.
Oh, this is March of this year. Okay.
This is March this year.
So the CEO of Anthropic said that in 6 months, AI will be writing 90% of code. Oh, and then there's another couple quotes about AI stealing your programming jobs in 6 months, right? That was the original one.
Oh, we are 11 months. Oh.
So we are 11 months into 6 months away from AI stealing your programming jobs.
That was in 2024.
Yeah, that was a year and a half ago. Prime, we are 15 months into 6 months away from AI stealing your programming jobs. Okay, a few months ago. We're 28 months into 6 months from AI taking your jobs. We're also 4 months into 24 months until Cursor is obsolete, because that was also predicted by people. And we're 6 months into 6 months until AI writes 90% of your code. Right, okay, this is the Anthropic one.
So is AI writing 90% of your code?
Well, so the most recent update, we're now 29 months into 6 months from AI taking your job. And Andre Karpathy just said it feels like the AI industry is slop. My own experience is I think...
Well, specifically, he says, I like the industry is trying to pretend that this current AI is amazing, and it's not, it's slop.
Yeah, this was this past week.
There's words in between that I took out because he did a little bit of more talking, but that's the gist.
Okay.
So you can see. I want people to see that because, I did some editorial thing right there. Because he said, the industry...
The opposite, you just cut it down.
Yeah, exactly. I went, dude, super hard on the news there.
So I think this is a funny meme where people have been hyping up the software thing insanely, right? You have investors or startup guys who are like, all of coding will be taken over by AIs in the next 3. And you hear this constantly. And that is not true. And I know you also feel that is not true. Certainly from my experience, though. So, I mean, I think I am like a solid intermediate level programmer, let's say, where I have the background, some industry experience, and I use it in my daily life. Whereas your audience, Prime, is speaking to the people who are deep in the sauce. So I think you have the higher kind of value audience that a lot of these companies are shooting for. In the intermediate band that I'm in, it's fucking incredible, right? And so an app like Cursor, which you've worked with a bunch, is truly magic for me. It has accelerated the rate at which I can make things by, let's say, 10x. Like literally, I make 10 times the amount of stuff that I did before. So for me, and this is, again, one of the reasons why I'm optimistic about these things, is because for my concrete job right now, it makes it way, 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 way better, and I pay $20 a month.
Yes.
But then let's scale up to like real professionals, which is your experience and audience.
Yes. So first off, I want to show this tweet right here that I have pulled up. So if you can do this. By the way, I've been blocked by Paul Graham because he made this tweet that said, what's something 1 million people are using that in 10 years, 15 billion people or some big number will be using? And of course, I responded, your mom. And then I just learned you can't make that joke to Paul Graham. Okay. So anyone looking to make a your mom joke, don't do that. It'll get you instantly blocked. So this is kind of on the hype side of things, right? I met a founder today who said he writes 10,000 lines of code a day now thanks to AI. This is probably the limit case. He's a hotshot programmer. He knows AI tools very well, and he's talking about 12-hour days. He's not naive. This is not 10,000 lines of bug-filled crap, right? So you can see that people are super stoked about AI.
I'm stoked. Reading this tweet, I'm stoked.
Dude, I know. I feel
Clearly,
like a NASCAR driver.
AI is going to solve all our problems. I can feel it.
But how does Paul know it's not bug-filled crap?
Well, because he said so.
It's in the tweet.
Duh.
Let's reread the tweet, Prime. I feel like you didn't see
I guess I didn't read it. I'm sorry.
And it's Paul Graham, who's a famous technologist.
He has a check mark.
Yeah.
He couldn't say this is not unless he knew.
That's true. No one has ever done that. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, you see these tweets all the time, and I think it blackpills so many people that are trying to learn technology, and I think it kind of like makes the world seem so complex that no one ever could really jump into it, and it's not really worth it, and it's just like there's the smart people that know how to do it, and I'm never going to do this, right? I'm too dumb to do 10,000 lines of code a day, okay? I can't do 10,000 anythings a day. So that is just out of control. So when I see this, it just makes me feel bad because people think it's just like the greatest thing that has ever existed. And I think for your use cases, and I do this also, smaller projects or like kind of like mid-size ones, you can just rip through really quickly because you're not there to be like, I'm going to maintain this with 5 different people. It's just like, no, I need to
10
have
years or
yeah,
something.
I'm just making this thing, and I don't like, it is not a long-term thing. And if I need to, I'll just tear it down and do it again in a day. It is so good. I've used it so many times that way. But like a long-term project, it's really hard. You cannot do this in a long-term project. The reason being is that the best way to describe it is that there's a bunch of human conventions or a way you kind of think about how you organize your data, that there's most significant to least significant, kind of like what is important to have in certain ordering. LLMs don't have that kind of thought process. We call it, they cannot decrease entropy. They just simply go, okay, I'll fix it, put it right here. And they just inline everything. And when I use an AI long enough, I'll say, hey, let's make this change. It makes the same change in like 5 different spots. And as that surface area grows, the more danger of just like bugs in your code, because then you have to have the same instructions over and over and over again. And so if you're not the one correcting it and you're not the one interacting with it, it's just going to slowly degrade into just craziness. I've hooked up Twitch chat to Devin, which is one of these kind of automated programs, and just let them go for 8 hours to see what they build. And just like the code is just terrifying. It's just like at the end of it, you're like, what? There's just like for loops. You don't know about those. Doug never taught you about them, but they exist. Okay. They're not government drones. And you go through it and it's just like nonsense.
Dude, when you say terrifying though, is it terrifying as in like indecipherable to humans, or terrifying as in it doesn't work?
Yes. Like the problem is that it'll just like, one of them was a update function, and the first thing it did, for those that do game development, the first thing it did is organize by Z index, which is how far away. Usually you do that in rendering theoretically, where you want to render stuff over the top of each other, so that way you get, you don't have something in the back rendering on top of something else. It just did that in an update function and then never touched it again or did anything. It just is doing work, because at one point that's how it was, and so it just didn't change that code because why would I change that code? That code's already there. You told me to add like some key input. Why would I ever change stuff, right? So it just keeps on adding.
Piling on
just keep on adding, keep on adding.
Another way to so I think somebody who hasn't done professional industry software doesn't realize that I would say maybe 80 to 90% of the work, it's not writing the initial solution to a thing. It is actually updating it so that it works with all the other teams, with all the existing software, that you make sure there aren't bugs, that it's testable, that it's going to have all these issues. So that's why corporate programming, in my experience, not nearly as fun, because the majority of it is thinking about how does this interface with everything else going on? How do you make sure it's actually going to stick around and work?
Layman understanding here is that it lacks the ability to understand all the context that this has to be built within. It just wants to dive at the problem straightforward and solve the very short thing that you've fed or given it, but it doesn't understand all the systems and people it needs to work within and be efficient within.
Let's say you're designing a city, right? A big part of designing a city is thinking how all the pieces are going to interact with each other, right? And what an AI right now tends to do is if you say, okay, make the power plant, right? The center of power for the city. It'll go, cool, I'll just do that right now. And it's not going to think about how that's going to interface with all the other pieces. And to your example, later on, it might never go back and think, how does that power plant I made 6 months ago relate to the houses here and the commercial district here and the roads we're doing and the plumbing system? And so as this stuff gets built sort of independently from each other and there's no thought and oversight as to how it will scale, how it will interact, it just becomes this unmaintainable disaster that at some point you start over rather than trying to fix it. And that's
called tech debt, is my understanding.
Tech debt, yeah. Okay. And so there's a lot of thoughts on that, but there are ways to obviously mitigate this. You can handhold it, you can take more of your time, and there's like a lot of benefits to that. I'll give kind of a pro side of things, something maybe a +1 to the hypers that I think is really useful. So I'm in the middle of writing a small kind of just like fun game, and it has like 60, 70,000 lines of Lua in it. And so a small game, that'd be considered like a small game.
Okay.
And I wanted to add something. And so we go in there and I just asked the AI, hey, go at it. And there was like 5 different spots that had to make the change. And I looked at that and said, hey, here's something we haven't thought about. It's kind of screwed up. I'm now going to take this like AI's investigation, which would have taken me like 2 hours to figure out all the spots. Instead did it for me in 5 minutes. Now I'm going to go home and think about it for like an hour and really come up with a more organized solution to this. And then that's great. So AIs can be really awesome because it can save me hours of research by just asking it questions to go search my code base, figure out how to do these things. And that's super useful because then I don't have to go play, Jean-Luc Picard and explore the galaxy. Instead, it just does it for me.
I mean, my connection there is the use that I've heard law firms talk about. It's like we've taken this process of having to dig through thousands and thousands of pages of writing about a case that somebody's working on, have the AI search for points instead, and you can at least eliminate that part and then have the human review the actual problem after the fact.
Yeah, I love it. Like I call it semantic searching. In other words, like semantic usually means like the meaning of something. So it's like that search is awesome because old Google, you have to say it in a very descriptive way. Now you can say it like in a very prescriptive way where it's just, how does this make you feel? And it's going to like do stuff. So it's really cool in that kind of sense.
A question I have for you, I saw a clip where you're going on I would say a short rant where you said something funny. I want to code, I want to dance, and I don't want to go home. And you're in the midst of describing how this is automating or taking away a bit of the joy or the appeal of programming. It's servicing problems or answering and creating code is taking away some of the work that most people enjoy about coding or programming in the first place.
Yeah.
And now you're in a place where you're writing documentation more than anything, which is actually the part of the job that most programmers hate.
Yes.
And I wanted you to explain that a little bit and how that contrasts with what we're talking about right now.
I can put it in a non-programmer kind of way. Right now, like there's a huge push, you see it at least in some level of articles about game programming. They're like, AI image generation will just solve everything. It's just like, well, making the art and the style of the game, like that's part of the fun part. Like I want to have a feel to it.
Yeah.
Instead it's just like, no, generate as fast as possible. And it doesn't have that same cohesion. It doesn't have that same kind of feel to it, that genuine, like you can see the expression of the artist in the game. And so it's the exact same thing where instead of doing the work that's fun and creative and actually takes like time and thought, you're instead just writing the documentation of how it should be. You're just constantly, that's all it is. It's like somehow in this AI world, we were promised that it was going to cure cancer and fold our laundry. Instead, it's doing all of our art and all of our creative projects, and we're just having cancer and folding laundry. It's like, what the hell's happened here? Where's this trade-off? And so that's kind of the idea of the rant is I never realized I've been tricked into writing documentation instead of programming the whole time, which was I was very upset at the revelation.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And then, of course, the even funnier part about this whole thing is that Suno AI music generation. Yeah. We generated a song, said, I want to be Tej, I want to code, I want to dance, I don't want to go home. And we just had to just repeat and just say that over and over again in a club style. So that was me referencing a song I listened to 1,000 times.
That makes sense.
Oh, I wanted to bring this up because I have a friend who is a doctor. This just got announced like today. They got a big $1 billion investment or whatever, but it's called Open Evidence. And apparently it's like OpenAI for medicine, but it doesn't hallucinate at least nearly as much, or it's like way, 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 way lower. And two separate doctors now have told me that it's like sweeping that. People are using it all the time and it's pretty useful. And I wanted to shout that out because I trust this guy. And he said he's tried ChatGPT and it's generally gives him something that he can't rely on, but this has. So I clearly like maybe the broad LLMs are not going to be more slop trained or not working, but focused ones that are specific to a task could be more helpful or increase productivity.
That's been my theory for a while. I think I've said that on the podcast, which is that, if trying to appeal to every single use case is so ridiculously hard, but it's so clear that many, many industries are not going to be successful by jamming ChatGPT in there. Doctors would appreciate, and again, I've talked to doctors, or again, my sister who's a nurse and there are already software programs that people in industries like a lawyer or a doctor use that help them gather information they need for a case or prep a case or do whatever. And these programs could be supercharged by having an AI system that can scan through 10,000 documents for them and like pull something up like that instantly, or to reframe it in a way that is relevant for a specific case. But obviously in these contexts, it's super important to get it right. And so if you have a company whose entire thing is about consolidating a bunch of medical data and presenting it in a format that is really helpful, and they figure out the logistics and litigation risks of all this stuff, that's where there's going to be a ton of value. And so that is already happening with law. I forget if I actually brought it up, but there's quite a few companies that are finding major success selling to law firms. And it's not ChatGPT and it's not Anthropic. It's companies that have, I think Bloomberg, I'm fairly certain has one of them that is like really successful, but it's just legal documentation and assistance. Mm-hmm. And their whole thing is like, they're not trying to write erotica for people. They're just doing the legal side. They have tons and tons of effort on just safeguarding to make sure that there aren't hallucinations around cases that don't exist. And I think every industry is going to have stuff like that. And this is why I'm actually curious your thought. I've always felt like not only because of the DeepSeek stuff that we mentioned earlier, where it's easy to use ChatGPT 5 to make your own model. On top of that, if you're spending $200 billion as ChatGPT to make the next model that's going to make everybody happy, you'll inevitably not make everybody happy. Every industry is going to have its own needs and challenges, and you're spending the most money of anybody versus a company that comes in with $100 million and makes something that's just really, really incredible for, I don't know, truck drivers or whatever, like a specific industry. And so I have a hard time believing that the profit is going to come from the foundation models. Here's what you think.
Here's the thing is, first I'll tell a quick story. For the last year, I've been having some voice problems. Turns out I have muscle tension dysphonia, which means I just have, I don't know, throat keeps swelling for some odd reason. And during that, I went to many doctors and no doctor was able to figure it out. And so I ChatGPT'd and ChatGPT figured it out. It's really good. And then I went to a doctor and he's like, that's it. That is the one. And so,
That's crazy.
It's crazy when you
that is a crazy thing to hear, actually.
Well, when you have like a medical condition and you realize that doctors aren't like, they're like a detective with varying degrees of ability, and that you like, maybe they'll be able to solve your case. They don't just like solve every problem. Every doctor is sort of like making an educated guess based on what they know. And you might literally need to go to 20 and the 20th. Yes. Or if you have a serious medical procedure, like operating on cancer, that you'll have one doctor say, yeah, we could operate. We think this is going to save your life. And another says, don't really know. And another says that will definitely kill you. And all three are the most qualified doctors in the state. And it's like, what the fuck, right?
Just an episode of House you just described.
Yes. And this happens anybody with a chronic condition knows this. Anybody who's had to do a major surgery knows this. It's rare that there's this complete consensus with the medical industry.
Honestly, if you've had a conversation longer than 30 minutes with any doctor, you find this out. It's like, this is
More
not as all refined as I thought it would be.
That's one of the reasons why it's so easy to shit on AI for valid reasons. But at the same time, it's like, you shouldn't presume that the systems we have are some flawless bastion. Like, you shouldn't assume that every lawyer is just fucking acing it every time. They absolutely are not. You shouldn't assume every doctor is acing this. It's really fucking hard to do this. And if you have a tool that you can talk to that can synthesize the entirety of all the information available in a few seconds, and you use that to augment smart humans, that's where I think it'll be really positive.
So I'm actually on board for this whole doctor thing. I don't know how much money it would take and all that, or if the foundational models can't just do the things it needs to do anyways. Like if they will be good enough just to be able to do it.
ChatGPT can just be your doctor eventually,
As opposed to like having a specific industry that's only surrounded with one model. Maybe there's some fine tuning, some other techniques that they can do to make it better.
Okay.
So I have no like strong opinion whether that's the future or is it just ChatGPT gobbles them all up because it has monopoly amount of money on stuff, and so it's just like I win everything because I have enough information. But at the end of the day, it's really about the people who use it. I don't want to just have ChatGPT tell me my problem. I'd much rather know what it is, go to a couple doctors and see what they have to say, and then bounce off what I've been told and see like where it can be, because you just never know. I've heard just craziest stories about exactly these doctor things where one person figured it out and it was the most completely opposite thing that even ChatGPT couldn't get. And so is there a lot of money in it? Probably a ton of money if you can really solve it.
Okay, that's what I want to talk about then. I want to go even broader here, which is